A promise was made, the prophets of old. From David's throne, a Savior foretold. The Word became flesh, God's only Son. Light of the world, the righteous one.
Here we are kind of rounding the home stretch for our study on Does God Exist? As we're warming up to do our study on the doctrine of God, about actually the attributes of God, the character of God. As we just kind of look at the theology of who and what God is, we thought, let's take a moment and address the issues that are kind of becoming more prevalent in our secular society that people push back against. Is there even a God? The Bible's a fairy tale. There's no, God out there. That's all made up. And so we've been looking at, does God exist? And last week we did kind of a review, just a recap, since we had a few weeks off from the holidays. We did a review over the scientific things we covered about the beginning of the universe, the origin of life, the information that's found in our DNA, and how all of that evidence points to the fact that you need a creator, an intelligence behind all that to make it happen. And we're shifting gears now. We're going to talk about morality. How morality, the fact of morality in life, points to the existence of God. It's what's called the moral argument. And we touched a little bit on it last week just to kind of lay the foundation. Here's the traditional kind of formulation of how this argument goes. If God does not exist, morality is not objective. Morality is objective, therefore God exists. And we talk about how objectivity, just to make sure we know that what we're talking about there, objective versus subjective. Objective is something that is a fact. Subjective is something that is an opinion. So if I were to ask you, show of hands, who in here is hot? Anybody hot? No? Anybody here cold? No? Right? A little warm? Maybe? A little cool, right? Just right. All of that is subjective. It's your opinion. It's kind of your feeling of your experience. But if I were to say, hey, can you look and see what that thermostat says? That would be objective. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks. Doesn't matter what anyone's opinion is. The temperature is what the temperature is. And so I might feel hot, but the temperature is what it is. So feelings would be subjective. Objective is the fact of the matter. And what we're saying is morality is objective. That morality is, there is a right, there is a wrong. There is a good, there is a bad. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks about it. It is what it is. And so it is wrong to murder. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. It will always be wrong to murder, however anybody feels. Right? There are people who are in prison right now who felt perfectly justified in murdering someone, and they are wrong because murder is objectively immoral. However, we are not going to go through that argument. We're going to keep the tactic that we've been doing this whole study, the multiple competing hypothesis. Different ideas trying to explain what we see. Right? Whenever we looked at the beginning of the universe, we said, okay, which one of these belief systems accounts best, explains best that the universe exists? And so that's what we're going to do here. Which one of these belief systems has the best explanation for why we have morality? But before we get to that, we have to actually show that we have morality. Best explanation, just kind of give us the criteria we're going by. What makes an explanation best? It's the one that can provide a cause to produce what we see. And what we see is objective morality. So which one of these will be able to support that cause? Which one can cause that to exist? So how do we know objectives are moral? Next week we'll actually get into the examining of which of these views actually could explain objective morality. But how do we know if morality is objective? How do we even know objective morals exist? Because there's people out there who say they don't. Well, that's right for you. You might think it's wrong. but I don't think it's wrong, and so you can't push your values on me. It's all relative. Just you believe what you want to believe. I'll believe what I want to believe. Right? That is a point of view that is out there in our culture that people believe. So if we're going to say, no, that's not the case, how do we know it? So that's what I'm going to do tonight is kind of try to make that case that yes, there is morality. Yes, it is objective. And then next week we will take a look at how that can be explained. However, before I dive off into that, one thing I want to do, just to give us a good idea of what we are doing and talking about with the moral argument. Like I said, we're not going to get into that other formulation of the argument. We're going to take a different strategy. But I want to show you this short video that does address that formulation. This is actually a pretty good video. I hope maybe you can help out understanding things. I can make it work. Is it going to work? No, that's still staying. Why are you still there? Hold on. To err is human. To really mess up, you need a computer. There we go. No. Okay.
Good without God. Let's find out. Absolutely astounding. There you have it. Undeniable proof that you can be good without believing in God. But wait, the question isn't, can you be good without believing in God? The question is, can you be good without God? See, here's the problem. If there is no God, what basis remains for objective good or bad, right or wrong? If God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. And here's why. Without some objective reference point, we have no way of saying that something is really up or down. God's nature provides an objective reference point for moral values. It's the standard against which all actions and decisions are measured. But if there's no God, there's no objective reference point. All we're left with is one person's viewpoint, which is no more valid than anyone else's viewpoint. This kind of morality is subjective, not objective. It's like a preference for strawberry ice cream. The preference is in the subject, not the object. So it doesn't apply to other people. In the same way, subjective morality applies only to the subject. It's not valid or binding for anyone else. So, in a world without God, there can be no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. God has expressed his moral nature to us as commands. These provide the basis for moral duties. For example, God's essential attribute of love is expressed in his command to love your neighbor as yourself. This command provides a foundation upon which we can affirm the objective goodness of generosity, self-sacrifice, and equality. And we can condemn as objectively evil greed, abuse, and discrimination. This raises a problem. Is something good just because God wills it, or does God will something because it is good? The answer is neither one. Rather, God wills something because he is good. God is the standard of moral values, just as a live musical performance is the standard for a high-fidelity recording.
Without your love.
The more a recording sounds like the original, the better it is. Likewise, the more closely a moral action conforms to God's nature, the better it is. But if atheism is true, there is no ultimate standard. So there can be no moral obligations or duties. Who or what lays such duties upon us? No one. Remember, for the atheist, humans are just accidents of nature, highly evolved animals. But animals have no moral obligations to one another. When a cat kills a mouse, it hasn't done anything morally wrong. The cat's just being a cat. If God doesn't exist, we should view human behavior in the same way. No action should be considered morally right or wrong. But the problem is, good and bad, right and wrong, do exist. Just as our sense experience convinces us that the physical world is objectively real. Our moral experience convinces us that moral values are objectively real. Every time you say, hey, that's not fair, that's wrong, that's an injustice, you affirm your belief in the existence of objective morals. We're well aware that child abuse, racial discrimination, and terrorism are wrong for everybody, always. Is this just a personal preference or opinion? No. The man who says that it is morally acceptable to rape little children is just as mistaken as the man who says 2 + 2 = 5. What all this amounts to, then, is a moral argument for the existence of God. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. But objective moral values and duties do exist. Therefore, God exists. Atheism fails to provide a foundation for the moral reality every one of us experiences every day. In fact, the existence of objective morality points us directly to the existence of God.
There you go. Objective morality points to the existence of God. Any questions about that? That's just a little plug. Where am I at? Is it going to work? Hey, there we go. That video was made by a ministry of Dr. William Lane Craig. He's a philosopher, theologian. Don't agree with him on everything, but he does really good work on this issue. Any questions about anything in the video? Any thoughts? No? Okay. Well, so we're going to move on with establishing that, just as it said, that objective moral values do exist. We're going to take a little bit different tact. How do we know? Well, first off, we know pretty much how the video said, right? We can apprehend these truths the same way our physical senses tell us things about the physical world. We have a moral sense that tells us that something is immoral. It's what's called a properly basic belief. A properly basic belief is something that you're rational to hold on to it unless or until something comes along to show you that it is wrong. It's something that you intuitively recognize is true about reality, and you don't have to actually do any kind of reasoning to get there. It's a belief that is justified without any need for support or argument. You didn't have to connect some dots to figure it out. You just observed it and recognized it to be true. And so that is a properly basic belief. And morality, being objective, is a properly basic belief. We know that there are things that are right or wrong. Right? In the video, it gave examples. And it's those same kind of examples. If we were to ask someone, is child abuse wrong? I don't know anyone except for maybe the most diehard or conscience-seared kind of person who's going to go, well, it's just an opinion. Maybe you don't like abusing children, but maybe somebody else does. No one's going to say that. We would all recognize abusing children is wrong. Likewise, the Nazis. Anyone who's going to say that morality is not objective has to say that the Nazis did nothing wrong. We just happen to not like what they did. That's what they would have to go. And most people are not going to go there. I've seen people engage in an argument with this, and someone brings up that question to the subjective morality person. They say, so you're saying the Nazis didn't do anything wrong, and you could see them squirming. They don't want to say no, right? But they've argued themselves into that corner where they either have to give up and admit they're wrong or say the Nazis didn't do anything wrong. And also, people just don't live a relative lifestyle. People live as if they know things are wrong. I was talking to someone who is actually the youth. I was with the youth last Sunday, and someone brought up the question about morality. Somebody wants to say that there's no such thing as right or wrong. What do you do? And I said, steal their wallet. Don't steal their wallet. Stealing's a sin. But it would get across the idea, because I guarantee you in that moment, they're going to think that you did something wrong. Right? Even C.S. Lewis, when he was an atheist, and then later he becomes a Christian, he said that when he was an atheist, one of the things that just bugged him so much is the injustice and the evil in the world. How can there be a good God with so much injustice in the world? God can't possibly exist. And then he got to thinking, well, what do I mean by injustice? Well, what do I mean by evil? What do I mean by wrong? Unless there's a standard of right, unless there's a standard of justice, you cannot claim injustice. You cannot claim evil unless there's a standard of good. And that's what kind of led him to go, wait a minute, and start really thinking. And so started kind of breaking his shell a little bit. French philosopher Voltaire says that if God did not exist, we would have to invent him. That it is so obvious that the things in reality are such a way, like we said before with the scientific stuff, the beginning of the universe, the origin of life, the information in our DNA, the more we learn about cells, the more it's just like, wow, right? Morality. If God wasn't real, we'd have to make him up because it's the only thing that explains what we see around us. So here's what we're going to do. We've got these three conditions. Okay, fine. There's objective morality. What are the conditions for objective morality to exist? And then we're going to use these three standards to measure the worldviews by next week whenever we are looking at those. The first one is a transcendental standard. That just means universal. It's outside of humanity. It transcends. It is above humanity. It's a standard that applies to all of us. I'm not going to try to pronounce that first name. Dostoevsky, Russian philosopher, writer, he said, if God is dead, then all things are permissible. Right? If there is no God, there's no standards. You do whatever you want. The actions of people, again, show that they don't really believe that God is dead. People live their life as if there is a reality, as if morality is objective. So here's our little argument. If God is dead, then all things are permissible. People do not act as if they think all things are permissible. Therefore, people are living as if God is not dead. So by their actions, they might say, I don't believe in God, but then by their actions, they're living a life that says, no, there has to be one. It's what in philosophy is called is does not equal ought. Just because something is the way it is doesn't mean it has to be. A little example. This is one thing, a lot of times arguments, they'll skip something. Someone will say, and I've heard some people say things like this, murder hurts people, therefore it's wrong to murder. What's missing? Murder hurts people. Therefore, murder is wrong. There's an idea missing. The fact that hurting people is wrong. They're kind of skipping over that part. There's this assumption in there. Okay, murder hurts people. Everyone agree that murder hurts someone? Right? It hurts the person who got murdered. It hurts their loved ones who now have to live without them. It's a painful experience. Murder hurts people. That's a fact. Hurting people is wrong. Well, where do they get that from? See, they're kind of inserting there kind of on the slide, not really stating it, but they're making an objective moral statement right there. Okay, so just because murder hurts people doesn't mean it's wrong. That would have to require that hurting people is wrong. So hurting people being wrong is an objective moral standard. So anytime you want to claim something is wrong, it can't be wrong just because it is. Right? It can't be wrong, stealing isn't wrong just because you stole something. Well, okay, just because you did doesn't mean it's wrong. There's another assumption, another idea that needs inserted in there, and that assumption is an objective standard. The second condition is human freedom of choice. Free will. God made us with free will. Right? We're able to choose things. So this idea that ought implies can. Ought implies can. If you should do something, if you have an obligation to do something, doesn't that imply that you can do it? Right? If you have, trying to think of a good example. Here's a bad example. I heard it. I didn't really like it, so I don't want to use it, but it gets the point across. It was a teacher giving an example. There was another teacher on campus that the kids liked. He was either like or hate, one way or the other. And his example was, okay, let's say you take this guy and you string him up the flagpole, by his belt loops, and then you cut the rope and you say, hey, don't hit the ground. Right? Well, he can't help it. It's going to happen. He has no control. There's no choice. There's no will. There's nothing he can do. What's going to happen is going to happen. It's crazy. You don't give people an obligation unless they're actually able to do it. I don't make my 3-year-old clean her room spotless with all of her toys all nicely exactly put up in the right place because she's 3. She can't. Right? We do good if we get 2 things put in the toy box before she starts playing again. Right? And so if there's going to be an obligation, there has to be the ability to do it. Ethical norms are only applied to persons who have a choice about whether or not they can meet that ethical norm. Does that make sense? Right? I mean, so if you're going to have a objective moral thing, first off, you have to actually have that objective standard above us, and then you have to actually be able to do it. It doesn't make any sense to punish people for something they had absolutely no control over. Third, you have to have a reason to regard humans as valuable and different than other forms of life. Most of morality is concerned with how we treat other people. Right? I mean, there's some that's like personal morality. Of course, that's kind of how you treat God. So I guess that fits there too. But most of morality is love people, be kind to people, don't lie to people, don't take people's stuff. I mean, it's kind of how ethics deals a lot with how we relate to other people. There we go. We all know Declaration of Independence, right? What was our basis for declaring our independence from England? Because we have rights. And our rights are being violated. Where did we get those rights? According to Thomas Jefferson, we have been endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Endowed by our Creator that we have these rights. We are valuable. We as human beings, there's something special about us. I'm going to try not to preach Sunday sermon, but that's actually kind of where we're going. Sunday, our message is being in the image of God. Sanctity of Life Sunday. We're going to approach it from the fact that we as human beings created in the image of God have a special intrinsic value and dignity just by the sake of being human. Most of the things that we say, you should not treat people that way, what people mean is, hey, that person has value, they have worth, they have dignity, that we ought to respect, that ought to be shown some kindness and consideration to. And it's not the same as we treat animals. Right? It even said in the video, right, there's something a little different. I remember years ago when I was working with youth, way back when I first started, I had a student who was not a believer, but she liked, some of her friends came and she liked me, so she came to church. And she asked me a question about animals. About animal rights and what I thought about animal rights. I'm like, well, we're supposed to care for the animals. We shouldn't abuse them, but they don't have rights like humans do. And this is what I asked her. I said, okay, you believe in evolution. You believe that we are just a higher form of life form. We're more developed with our mind and everything. Why should we take our ideas of ethics and put them on animals? If we're just animals ourselves, then why don't we take the rule of the jungle and apply it to humans? Right? There's a difference between humans and animals. Animals can't rape. Right? There are a lot of animals that whenever they mate, it is not a willing participation. But the animal's not guilty of rape. That's what animals do. Like the video said, whenever a cat kills a mouse, it didn't murder the mouse. It's just the animal kingdom and how they operate. There's not a moral component to what's going on in the animal kingdom. There is with humans. They have pets. or livestock, any kind of, you got animals. If you're on financial hard times, you're looking at the numbers, you're crunching the numbers, and you just it's not going to happen. We cannot survive like this. Something's got to go. How many people is it going to be your spouse? Right? Your mind probably didn't even go there. You thought, okay, do I need to get rid of the horse? Do I need to get rid of that goat? Do I need to get rid of the dog? You didn't think, should I get rid of one of the kids? Right? That's not where your mind goes. Because we know humans are more valuable. We have this intrinsic value and worth that animals do not have. And so, any thoughts or questions on any of that? Right? Anyone think I'm wrong? I wouldn't think so. Funny thing is, I've had people who would say, well, we are just, but then they don't live like that. That's what's so telling. Whenever people want to push back against these ideas, but then if you look at how they're actually living their life and the choices they're making, they're not living out what they're proclaiming. They're living out if God were real, which He is. That's why they live that way. They intuitively know it. My battery died. Okay, so next week what we're going to do is we're going to take our 4 worldviews. Just a little recap. We have these 4 main worldviews that we would probably encounter in our Western society. Maybe not so much one of them, but we have theism, right? That there's a God, a personal God involved with the world, who created the world. Deism, which actually says there's a creator God, but He just kind of wound it up and let it go. Not involved. He just kind of, from the beginning, said, bang, and there it went, and He left it alone. Then you have naturalism, which is the popular atheist view right now, that says that there is nothing outside the universe, matter and energy, that's all it is. Nature, physical objects, empirical, what we can see with our senses, that's all that exists. And then you have pantheism, which is kind of the like Buddhism, Eastern religion kind of ideas, maybe a little New Age kind of thing that came in. Died off a little bit though. This idea that just God is one and we are all one with God. God is not a mind, it's not a person, it's just this cosmic oneness that everything's a part of. That's pantheism. And so next week we're going to take a look at those 4 things, and you're in church, so I'm pretty sure you already know that we're going to come out thinking that theism is the right one. I hope you come to that realization. And so, any thoughts, comments, or any of that? Yeah.
Well, I think that God made us to worship something, and I think we all feel that inside, whether they're atheist or religious or something. But they're going to end up worshiping something. That need is how God made us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thing because we are made to worship. Specifically, we're made to worship Him. But then because of our rebellion, because of the fall, we take what should be given to Him and we go give it to other things because we don't want Him. And so.
God built a desire into us to worship, because you look at every race of people, old or they always worship something. They may not understand God. They may see, well, I can't control this, I can't control the sun, that's a God, or something. But they all worship something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even the atheists and skeptics that I engage with, they elevate. It's funny because they go back to worshiping nature. Only they don't worship the sun. They worship science, or they worship. They'll worship nature in the sense that that's where everything comes from. That's where what we know, and that's the only thing that makes up everything. That's all there is. But oftentimes, atheists kind of lead into what's called scientism. That is that all knowledge can only be known through science. That's scientism, and that elevates science up to they're worshiping it. That's what that is. This is our God. Tell us what is real. Tell us what is right. Tell us what is, and they elevate science up to that level.
Well, they generally worship things that were important to them, but that they could not control.
Yeah.
Like they had to have the sun. They had to have the rain. They had to have animals, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
They had to, and
Yeah. Well, there are forces that were more powerful than they were, and so they figured. But I think part of that is, from the beginning of time, mankind has known God is there. We just looked for other things to worship because we didn't want to worship Him. We didn't want His, whether it is of a sense of rebellion, of no thank you God, I'm going to go do my own thing, or whether it's a sense of shame. Right? Because sometimes that's what stands in place of us worshiping God, is because, you know what, I'm not worthy. I'm so horrible, you know what, I don't want to be in His presence, I'm going to go find something else to worship. And I think that can drive people away from God too. Whatever it is, cultures all over the world throughout history have picked all sorts of things to worship. But we're wired where we're supposed to be worshiping Him. That's good. Anything else? No?
One of my favorite stories, we had a missionary come and visit and tell us about their experiences overseas, and they were printing Bibles in the local language of the country that they were in and handing them out, and there was like a really elderly man in his 70s or 80s or whatever, somewhere in there. And he got his very first Bible in his language, and they said when he started reading it, he just wept, and they asked him what was the matter. He said, well, he always knew there was a God, but he just never knew His name, and he was so happy to
That's awesome.
find out that God had a name. He said he always knew there was one.
Yeah.
Knew He existed.
Because we know. The Bible tells us that, it's been revealed, it's plain for all to see, but there are those who suppress. It's not that they go, God exists, but I don't want to believe it, so I'm just going to push that aside. But they suppress their intuition. They suppress, so maybe it's culture helping them suppress, but they're a willing participant in it. But the knowledge of God, the just, look, He's there. Like Voltaire said, if there wasn't a God, we'd have to invent one. C.S. Lewis said, I don't believe in God, or I believe in God like I believe in the sun. Not because I see it rise, but because of it, I see everything else. And it's like that. It's like you don't believe the sun just because, oh, look, there's the sun. But, the sun is there and it shines on everything else. And you can see and everything makes sense now because the light is out. Same thing with God. Whenever there is God, and now everything kind of falls in place. And, oh, that makes sense now because there's God. And so, absolutely. Anything else before we close it out? Okay, well, next week we should finish up the moral argument, and then after that we'll get into actually study of the nature and character of God. And so, actually, wait a minute. We might be right about due for a Q&A in a couple of weeks. I'll have to look at the calendar. But sometime soon, we'll have all that going. But yeah, we're going to get into actually studying the nature of God, the actual doctrine of God. Who is He? His attributes, His character, His nature, that sort of thing. And so, what does the Scripture tell us about Him?
While we were sinners, Christ died for us. The blood of Jesus